In June 1667, England believed the war was almost over. Peace negotiations with the Dutch Republic were already underway. Much of the English fleet had been laid up in port to save money. Ships were docked along the River Medway near the naval base at Chatham, many of them undermanned, partially disarmed or in need of repair. The English government assumed the Dutch would wait for diplomacy to finish the conflict. They were wrong. The Second Anglo-Dutch War had been raging for years, fought largely for control of trade routes and maritime dominance. England and the Dutch Republic were two of the most powerful naval nations in the world, and their rivalry had turned the North Sea into a battlefield. By 1667, both sides were exhausted, but the Dutch leadership believed one decisive blow could strengthen their position at the negotiating table. So instead of waiting for peace, the Dutch Navy prepared something far more daring. Admiral Michael de Ruyter and his lieutenant Willem Joseph van Ghent assembled a fleet and sailed toward the English coast. Their target was not the open sea, it was England's naval infrastructure itself. The River Medway was the heart of the English Navy. The dockyards at Chatham contained warships, supplies and shipbuilding facilities essential to the Royal Navy. If the Dutch could reach it, they could strike at the centre of English naval power. English defences along the river were not prepared for such an attack. A defensive chain had been stretched across the water near Gillingham, intended to block enemy ships from sailing further upstream. Forts along the river were supposed to support the barrier, but the defences were incomplete, undermanned and poorly coordinated. On June 10, 1667, the Dutch fleet entered the Thames estuary and advanced toward the Medway. English forces attempted to slow them with small attacks and fireships, but the Dutch kept moving forward. Within days, they reached the chain barrier protecting the river. The moment that followed became one of the most humiliating episodes in English naval history. Dutch ships and fireships moved toward the chain under heavy smoke and confusion. Fireships, vessels packed with combustible materials and set ablaze, were sent drifting toward English ships, anchored along the river. The explosions and flames caused panic among the English crews. Amid the chaos, Dutch sailors managed to break through the defensive chain. Once the barrier was breached, the river defences collapsed. Dutch ships sailed upriver toward Chatham Dockyard itself. English warships anchored along the Medway were burned, captured or abandoned. One by one, the pride of the Royal Navy was destroyed within sight of its own dockyards. The most shocking moment came when the Dutch captured the English flagship HMS Royal Charles. The Royal Charles was not just another ship. It was one of the largest and most prestigious vessels in the English fleet. The Dutch boarded it, seized it, and towed it away as a trophy of war. Meanwhile, fireships continued drifting through the anchored fleet, igniting ships and spreading destruction along the river. By the time the attack ended, several major English warships had been burned or captured, and the dockyards had suffered severe damage. London itself began to panic. News spread that the Dutch Navy had sailed deep into English territory and struck directly at the nation's naval base. For a country that depended heavily on its navy for defence and trade, the psychological shock was enormous. The raid achieved exactly what the Dutch leadership had hoped for. It demonstrated that England's naval defences were vulnerable and that the Dutch Navy could strike at the heart of English power. The attack also strengthened the Dutch position in the peace negotiations that were already underway. Soon afterward, the war ended with the Treaty of Breda. Although neither side emerged completely dominant from the conflict, the raid on the Medway remained one of the most dramatic naval operations of the 17th century. For the Dutch Republic, it was a moment of extraordinary success, a daring strike that humiliated a powerful rival. For England, it was a lesson in complacency. An entire fleet had been caught unprepared, and a foreign navy had sailed into the country's own waters and destroyed its ships. Even centuries later, the raid is still remembered as one of the boldest naval attacks ever carried out. And it proved a simple but brutal truth about naval power in the age of sail. Sometimes the most devastating blow is not delivered in a great battle at sea, but at the enemy's own harbour. If you like this lecture, please like and subscribe. This very helps our channel. See you next lecture.